But some areas that I've been interested in a while, there's a couple of nonprofit organizations that have been using satellite images in West Africa and East Africa to identify homes with thatched roofs. And what they found is that thatched roofs actually are the biggest predictor of somebody that needs some sort of economic relief and economic stimulus, because the thatched roof needs to be replaced twice a year and is expensive to replace twice a year for these families with lower income. Whereas a metal roof is much more expensive once, but it doesn't need to be replaced for 10 years. So using satellite images to be able to identify families in need has been a great area of philanthropy, and just something that I'm personally very excited about, and I think there's a lot more to come in the future.
So we've seen AI dramatically accelerate, particularly data annotation work in a wide array of fields. For example, there's lots of folks who spend a ton of time looking at geospatial imagery, so satellite and aerial images, to understand how land is being used, how forests and water are changing. That, till now, has been a laborious manual task, and there's a huge opportunity for AI to accelerate that work and let those scientists spend more time thinking about what we're going to do about the changes they see in those images instead of annotating those images. And this has already really started to take off in the geospatial imaging space. We see a lot of the same types of trends in the wildlife conservation space, for example, where folks studying wildlife populations use a ton of remote sensors. Those might be motion-triggered camera traps, they might be acoustic sensors, they might be drones, and sometimes aerial surveys. That also produces a lot of data that someone has to sort through. And if it takes you a year to sort through 20 million images, that's a year less we have to do something with the scientific results. And so we've seen AI really start to transform the way people work with large volumes of data like that.
Most recently, and very much top of mind, of course, is the COVID vaccinations. And AI is an incredibly useful tool in the context of helping to schedule those vaccinations, to plan the distribution, to target informational messages towards people to encourage them to get vaccinated. And of course, in healthcare, AI is having a huge impact. I worked in drug design for a long time, where AI is being used to design new treatments, new treatment regimes, new diagnostics. And then, of course, AI is being used in education to create curricula that are custom targeted towards the needs of individual students, and helping monitor their progress against those curricula and target better and better quality education to everybody who needs it.
So I think in the short term, there's a huge opportunity for AI and technology to make conservation scientists and policymakers more efficient at the things they're already doing. And that isn't just about giving them some time back. That is about giving all of us some time back, because if we can use AI to shave 6 months or a year off of the type of large data annotation tasks that scientists are tasked with, that's essentially months or years that we get back in the fight against biodiversity loss and climate change. I think as we move forward a little bit, in addition to making scientists more efficient at the tasks they're already taking on, AI really lets us get to a scale of environmental monitoring that just isn't possible with human resources alone. In particular, monitoring all of the remote sensing data we collect all over the world to allow real-time response is simply impractical with humans as the only data review resource. AI really lets us get close to that scale where we can monitor all of the data coming in from all of the satellite and ground-based sensors all over the world to look for the cases where we really need to enable real-time response to critical environmental threats.
So I think AI is going to change everything. There's not an industry or a problem in the world that will not in some way be impacted by AI. One area that I've spent a lot of time thinking about is healthcare. So I worked in healthcare for a long time, working on AI to design pharmaceuticals. But there are many, many other areas where AI can be used to improve healthcare, whether it be designing better treatment regimes, whether it be targeting healthcare to the right people. So most doctor's visits, or most time between patients and doctors, is about relatively mundane conditions that are very common, relatively easy to treat. We know how to treat them. And and yet access to care is limited by your ability to speak to an actual doctor. So we can use AI instead, and people can interact with AI, possibly AI mediated by a smart, empathic human being who hasn't had to train for 10 years. Maybe they've trained for 2 years. Maybe they're a doctor's aide, for example. And so AI can upskill folks with less training to provide more care to more people.
It's amazing what we all just saw as a society the other day when the Perseverance rover landed on Mars using artificial intelligence. Absolutely incredible. And to think that if we want to first start to find a way to terraform Mars, and then we want to go beyond some of the moons and Saturn and Jupiter, it's probably going to be AI and bots doing the groundwork for us before we as humans can get there, because we're not so good at long distance travel now. So going far out into the future, I'm very excited about what that means for us as a interplanetary or as an interstellar species.
So actually, this is one of the things I'm most excited about, is the opportunity for AI on these big global challenges. And we already see AI having an impact. So one of the exciting things that's happening in energy today is the notion of a smart grid, right? The idea that we have devices that can signal how much energy they use or when they need that energy. We have facilities on the grid that can provide power in response to that need. And AI can mediate that, right? AI can help to balance that supply and that demand. And this is a big challenge for green energy, right? So green energy has this issue that windmills only turn when it's windy, and solar panels only provide power when it's sunny. And oftentimes that's not when the peak demand is. And so balancing that demand and supply is a huge, very interesting AI challenge.
Like, the human brain can only imagine what 3 to 5 ingredients together taste like. And there are companies that are assembling 10 and 12 different foods together to be able to then replicate something that is fairly simple. So, one of my favorite, which is a company based in Chile, they're using variations of pineapple and cabbage to be able to create the taste and flavor of milk. Now, who would ever imagine that pineapple and carrots together would create milk? But these are the things that AI can imagine that we can't.
And rather than thinking of AI helping to find sustainable solutions, we really like to think of it as, how can AI help scientists and policymakers and all of us find sustainable solutions to issues like climate change? That is, we really like to think of AI not as replacing the kind of work that humans do right now, but empowering the humans that are already working in that area. And so we think of AI as being a significant accelerator for folks who are reviewing data that tells us about the state of the environment right now, for folks who are reviewing experimental results about new and emerging technologies, really expanding the capabilities of environmental scientists and environmental policymakers to look over a wide slate of options and review all of the data that we can gather right now to enable humans and scientists to find the sustainable solutions we need to critical issues of biodiversity loss and climate change.